Hello everybody, let's take a quick look today at how to solve equations. Now remember, this is introductory and some of these questions you can do in your head, but I'm starting off with ones that are easy so you'll be able to double check that the answers make sense. But remember, today I'm going for strategy, okay? A way that's going to work for every type of equation. So an equation means that you're going to be solving for the missing value for the variable. And the way we do this is you have an equal sign that is separating the two sides of your equation, and you're going to be able to do the same stuff to both sides, the same operation with the same numbers to both sides, and the equation will remain balanced. You'll see a video on this later that describes that. So in this particular case, I have d plus 12 is equal to 34. So the rule that I'm teaching you today is you need to get the variable by itself by eliminating everything that's on the same side of the equation, of the equal sign. And the way you do it is to undo the operation that's there. So I probably should have started off with these ones in class, but let's take a look at them now. This says d plus 12 is equal to 34, and I need to get rid of a plus 12. So you're going to do the opposite operation. The real word is the inverse operation, and I'm going to subtract 12 from both sides. Now, why am I doing this? Well, by subtracting 12 from both sides, those two guys are going to cancel out. And all you're going to be left with on the left is a D. Now, it looks like I'm making the other side messy, but this is going to give us the answer that we need. 34 minus 12 is 22. And if you double checked, you could put the D as 22 into the equation, replace it back in, and that would be your answer. So what's the step? You look where the variable is, and you're going to undo the operation that is attached to that variable. In this case, letter B, I have minus 20. So to get rid of a minus 20, I'm going to be saying plus 20. And it's the same thing as if it was a negative 20 and I'm combining it against a positive 20. But whatever you do to one side, you're going to have to do to the other side. So it'd be positive 20 on the other side. And just like before, those two opposite operations are going to eliminate each other. And so you're just going to wind up with an A on the left-hand side. And the right, 52 plus 20 is equal to 72. The next question is, it's got the variable on the other side of the equation. But don't let that bother you. Just make sure you're going to keep it on the right-hand side. And you say, what is invading the territory of this letter? Why is the K not by itself? Well, there's a 17 there. It's a negative 17 that's being added to it, or a minus 17, whichever way you want to look at it. But you're going to have to do the opposite. So you're going to have to add a 17 to this side. But that's not enough. You have to do the same operation to both sides. So that means I'm going to have to add 17 to the other side also. And when the dust settles on the right-hand side, just like before, those two 17s have canceled each other, and I'll just be left with a K. And on the other side, it'll be 29. You can put a box around your answers, by the way, to show that that's the right answer. And then the last question, same routine. I want to get rid of the plus 10 by subtracting 10. Whatever you do to one side, you're going to do to the other side. So in this case, I'm going to be subtracting the 10 from the 19. Ooh, wrong color. Let's go with the black ink. Negative 10. And on the left side, those two 10s are going to cancel out. All you're going to be left with is the A. And on the right side, negative 19 minus 10 is going to be negative 29. Now, this was getting rid, okay, for adding and subtracting the extra term, adding or subtracting the extra term that was on the same side as the variable. And so what we need to now do is say, well, what happens if there's a multiplication? Now, I'm going to start off with one that's a little bit easier, where it's just multiplying whole numbers, but then we're going to look at something a little more complicated after that. So in this case, this is going to be multiplications that we have. And when they're multiplications, we can undo the multiplication by doing a division. Whatever you have multiplied by the letter is going to be divided away so that we can get the letter by itself. So in question A here, we have 12n. I'm going to divide it by 12 because 12 divided by 12 is going to be 1, right? I don't want to know what 12n is. I want to know what 1n is. And just like before with the additions and subtractions, here with the multiplication, whatever you do to one side, you're going to do to the other. So I'm going to divide both sides by 12. And that's going to give me negative 3. In question B, I've got the 5m. I'm going to divide both sides by the coefficient of the variable. To eliminate a multiplication by 5, we're going to divide by 5. And whatever you do to one side, you're going to do to the other. Now, remember the secret for this. The 5 divided by the 5, those guys are going to just cancel out, right? It's going to be a 1. Just like in the previous question, the 12 and the 12 canceled out and became a 1. So on the right side, I'm going to just be left with 1m. Now, you can write the 1 or you can decide to not write it. But at the end, you have to still work out the other side of the question, which is 45 divided by 5, which is equal to 9. And life is all fine and dandy when these questions are working out to nice whole numbers, and you can actually plug it back into the original question to see whether it works. Now, letter C is a little bit different because it's not going to work out evenly. I see that I need to eliminate the coefficient on the m, which is 6. So it's a multiplication by 6, so I'm going to divide the 6. And the rule is whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. And your equation, I should stick these barriers in all of these questions. You don't switch sides for anything here. All you do is you divide both sides by the same amount. So the 6 divided by 6 is going to be just 1m, right, all by itself. And the 33 over 6, you can reduce it right away. You don't divide it because it doesn't go evenly, and we're not using calculators, and you're not expected to recognize the decimal amount. So it's 33 over 6, but we can reduce 33 over 6 by dividing the top and the bottom by 3, right? So this isn't really algebra anymore. This is just fractions. You can divide the top and the bottom by 3, and that's going to let me have m equals 11 over 2. Don't change to mixed. Keep it as an improper fraction and make sure that it's reduced. Simplify. And the last question in this row, negative 12 times m. I want the m by itself, so I'm going to divide both sides by negative 12. Now, don't let the negative bother you here. It's the same thing as we did before with fractions. You're just going to have another negative floating around at the end of it all. So the two negative 12s are going to simplify into simply a 1. So 1m. And then the 56 over 12, well, 56 over negative 12, I'm going to have to reduce this fraction. So 2 steps to reduce it. The first thing I'm going to do is divide the top and the bottom by 4. 4 goes into the 56, I'll write m equals. 4 goes into 56, let me write my division on the side. 56 divides by 4, and it's going to be equal to 14. And 12 divides by 4, and it's going to be 3. But don't forget that there's a negative sign in that denominator. Now, this is perfectly acceptable as your final answer. Later on, we'll be talking about how to put the negative in the right spot so that there's no confusion about whether the fraction is positive or negative. Okay, now hopefully I'm going to do some damage control on the way this may have been described at first. Question in the next row, questions are all multiplied by a fraction. Now, as I said, for multiplications, you would undo the operation. And for the previous questions, the multiplication meant dividing by the value that was multiplied with the variable. But here, in questions A, B, C, and D, you're multiplying by fractions. And we do not want to be reducing by dividing both sides by a fraction. So the rule for these guys is you're going to, and here's the phrase, multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient of the variable. In other words, p is multiplied by 2/5. If I used the strategy up above, I would have been dividing both sides by 2/5, and that is just too complicated. It can be done, but we have a much faster way of doing this. And so what you're going to do is multiply by the reciprocal. In other words, I'm going to multiply by 5 over 2. It looks like I'm going to make the question uglier, but what is 5 over 2 times 2 over 5? It's just 1. So that's going to be 1p. But remember the rule, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. And this is where you have to be just a little careful about how you set it up, because You're multiplying 8 by 5 halves. And you better remember that 8 as a whole number can be rewritten as 8 over 1. Now there's some canceling that can go on here, but I'm not going to do the canceling at this step. I encourage you guys to do the canceling. But now I'm simply going to say 8 times 5 is 40, and 1 times 2 is 2. And then I'll take the final step where I reduce that fraction into 20 over 1. So basically, you're going to multiply by the reciprocal of the coefficient of the variable. So in the next case, I've got 5/6 multiplied by n. I'm going to multiply by 6/5. That's the coefficient. It's flipped. The reciprocal, I've called it. And you do the same thing to the other side. So we don't care about the fact that this is 8/3. It could be 9/7 or any other fraction. But I still just got to know I've got to multiply that by 6/5. Now on the left side, as I said, it's always going to turn out into something nice. That's why you choose to multiply by that reciprocal. In this case, every time it's going to wind up as 1. 1n. On the other side, well, maybe we can clean this up later, but for now I've got 48 over 15. 8 times 6 over 3 times 5. And now I'm going to reduce that fraction, divide them top and bottom by 3, and that's going to give me 16 over 5. Keep it as an improper, simplified fraction. In question C, the variable is on the other side, but don't let that bother you. It's 3/2 times y, and I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal of 3/2. You always look to where the variable is. That's what decides what you need to do to get it by itself. So this is multiplied by 3/2, so I'm going to multiply by 2/3 the reciprocal. And whatever you do to one side, you're going to have to do to the other side, but I'm going to put a bracket here so that you don't get messed up with the negative. And so that's 2 over 3 times negative 12 over 1. The right side, let me do some canceling here. The 3's cancel, the 2's cancel. It's 6 over 6, whichever way you want to look at it, it's going to be y. And on the second side, the left side is going to be negative 24 over 3, right? 2 times 12 is 24, 3 times 1, and don't forget about the negative. And that reduces, this is just dividing. Negative 24 divided by 3 is negative 8. And then question D, we've got 3/7 times t equals 1/3. So I have a multiplication by 3/7. If I ended up multiplying that by 7/3, that's going to make it equal to 1. And whatever you do to one side, you got to do to the other side. Oops, forgot the barrier on question C. So you're going to multiply the right-hand side by that 7/3 again. Now in the previous, on the left side, the 3's and the 7's cancel, and you're going to just wind up with 1t. And this time I'm not even going to write the 1, I'll just write t. And on the other side, it's going to be top times top, bottom times bottom, and nothing cancels anyway, so it's 7 over 9. And this question, you're actually finished at this point. So now when you get the question, the last row here, and you're going to look and say, oh my goodness, those questions were so ridiculous. Well, really, we're still doing the same thing. I'm going to multiply so that the 6 cancels out. So I'm going to multiply this by 6 over 1. Because the 6's will cancel, right? 6's will cancel. And whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other side. So 6 over 1, which I don't even really need to write that 1, do I? In the next question, I'm going to get rid of the 5 on the bottom of this fraction by multiplying by 5 over 1. Same thing, I'll multiply the other side by 5 over 1. I'm going to finish these off, but I'm running out of time in my video here. I got a maximum of 15 minutes. I'm going to multiply by negative 2 on the top over 1. And the last one, I'm going to multiply by 6 over 5. No, I'm not. Okay, so here's a typical mistake. I'm trying to get rid of the 5/6. No, I'm not. I need to get the y by myself. So, but by itself. So it's the 8 that I need to eliminate by multiplying by 8 over 1. And you multiply the other side by 8 over 1 also. So let's finish this off real quick. This is going to be n is equal to 48. The next one, the 5 times the negative 12 is negative 60 equals just x. The next one, the negative 2's cancel, and you're left with d equals negative 34. And the last one, the 8's cancel, and you're going to wind up with y equals to 40 over 6, which reduces to a fraction. You're going to divide the top and the bottom. But time is up, so I got to go now, and I'll leave it that way. Thank you.